Hi, this is the second part to a much longer reaction. If you haven't seen it yet, links to it are in the description as well as the top corner of the video. Now with all that out of the way, let's continue with this then, shall we? Negative photons.
What we're seeing here isn't an entry. It's Gaster dictating an entry. This scene that Entry 17 appears in has all the hallmarks of a video being recorded in a very dark place. And I don't know what the experiment that Gaster was doing was about, but photon readings negative, photons being massless particles of radiation that create light waves on the electromagnetic spectrum, makes me think that it was actually a very dark experiment indeed. Literally.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, please stop with that.
An experiment happening in a dark lab with security cameras. We hear background noise like all the other tapes. We hear an actual character, probably Gaster, talking, and the character in the video refers to others that are present around them and asks them questions. Something you wouldn't do if you were just cataloging like all the other entries. Then we need to remember as well what the boat person said to us about the man who speaks in hands. It's very distinct how they specify the word speaks. Not writes or types, but speaks in hands. The reason his other entries aren't in Wingdings may be because he only speaks in hands. Gaster just types normally. Papyrus, who writes and talks in Papyrus, types in just regular font on the Undernet. So Gaster, assumedly, would do the same. There's a distinct likelihood as well that, judging by the sounds of hell in the background, he may be in an altered state of being right now. By that I mean, maybe he didn't always speak in hands until his experiments with determination failed, and then he moved on to different vectors of research. Related to that topic, note how the letters are moving in Gaster's entry. They're shaking. When some characters are close to death in Undertale, like during the Undyne or Toriel fight, the letters in their text box start shaking. This implies they're struggling to hold on to life and forcing out their last words. If these shaking letters in Gaster's entry mean anything, it's that this vector of research that Gaster was doing is being done close to his death or causing his death. More importantly, it means that these shaking letters imply that we're hearing someone speaking, meaning that this is a recording. The sound bites for Gaster's entry are made up of 7 different samples. These samples can be heard to talk to us in a file that first came with the original 1.0 version of the game. The file is called ABC_123_A.
Hello, have some respect and don't spoil the game.
It's impossible to have mysteries nowadays.
Because of nosy people like you.
Please keep all of this between us.
If you post it online, I won't make any more secrets.
No one will be impressed.
It will be your fault.
It warns us not to spoil the game for others. The fact that these
I've never heard
soundbites
that
used
before.
as speech in the ABC_123_A file are also used to make up the sounds we hear during this entry, we can assume that what we're hearing then is, once again, someone talking. And
okay, so this is really blowing my mind here. The possibility that this might have been like a recording from Gaster, like just before he died, or was otherwise like removed from the timeline. So I guess I was partially right on the whole thing about Entry 17 being done live, but yeah, I guess. I mean, we do see other characters, like specifically Sans and Papyrus, where they speak in the font that they're named after. We gotta continue this. I need more.
And once again, implying that this is a recording.
No, yeah, and also, obviously the whole like noise in the background, that could also be going into the whole thing where like Gaster is either in excruciating pain or is on the verge of dying here, or it might be something involving like the scientist. It's just, oh god.
And finally, look at the way in which we access this entry. We don't go up to a monitor on a wall in game, but we actually have to hack the game to even find it. There's no guarantee that what we're seeing here is meant to be viewed in the same context as every other lab entry we read. And being that there are videos within the True Lab itself of all places that allow the comparisons that I've been making so far between Gaster's entries and videotapes, it implies Toby's intent for us to come to this conclusion that this Gaster entry is likely a recording, a videotape. Another explanation is that it's likely that, because there were two others present during this entry's creation, and Gaster is clearly dictating here, somebody else was probably writing or typing up what the former royal scientist was saying, and therefore the actual writer of the entry. If it was their job to be Gaster's secretary of sorts in these matters, then it's likely that they also were the writer of all of Gaster's previous entries as well. Basically, this isn't solitary cataloguing like the other entries, as I said. This is a video of Gaster making entry 17 while doing his experiments with others watching, recorded in a dark lab with the security cameras of the lab. This is a tape. I believe the entry 17, if we were to find it on one of the terminals like the other entries, would not contain the ... What do you two think? At the end. I believe that to be a separate statement to two other characters after the entry he was making was finished being typed. So let's recap what I've gone through so far. The
Okay.
True Lab entries can't possibly have been written by only one author, as there is a distinct timeline gap that can be seen when looking at these entries. The gap in time is separated into two eras, the time before Gaster disappeared and the present day. Normally written entries seem to have been typed during the Queen's era, and all the lowercase entries are typed in the present day. The lowercase entries mention Metaton and likely activities performed by alphys, implying they have been recently added. The normally written entries speak of a time before any humans fell into the underground and also speak of the Queen, implying they were written ages ago. Alphys, the creator of Metaton and Trash Enthusiast, speaks normally but types in lowercase on the undernet a majority of the time. This implies that she is the lowercase author, as the contents of the lowercase entries match with what we know about her past and present activities, as well as her typing style matching that of the entries. This leaves the normal entries unaccounted for. However, if we analyse how the enigmatic entry 17 is presented to us, and conclude that it is in fact the former royal scientist W.D. Gaster being recorded on a camera in a dark place, verbally dictating the creation of what would have been a typed version of entry 17, then we can assume that Gaster, or somebody who types for him, possibly types in a different way than he speaks. As we know, Gaster lived a long time ago, and also held the same position as royal scientist that alphys now holds, meaning he would have known the royal family, the Queen, a time before humans arrived, and also had access to the True Lab. Since it's also a possibility that his typed entries wouldn't have to match the font and capitalization of his speech, it then now places Gaster as the most likely, if not only character that could have possibly have been the normal entry author. Thus we now have our two authors for the True Lab entries, the two royal scientists, Omne Ignotum Pro Magnifico. With that explained, we can now go through the entries again and understand the new and horrifying perspective laid out before us. Answering the timeline
where is this going?
contradictions once and for all, with alphys as the lowercase writer and Gaster as the normal writer. But don't worry, this time I'll be much more quick and concise.
Okay, I have to say, like, what does it say about a game like Undertale that, like, how many years after it's been, like, released, and, like, how many years after, like, the majority of sort of, like, the lore-based, like, discourse around it has sort of, like, died down as people kind of come to assume, oh, we know everything, or most everything about the game, that as of 2 weeks of recording this, when this was published 2 weeks ago, that there are still new videos and theories coming out about this game that absolutely shake up everything that I could possibly know about it. It is absolutely fascinating. True entries.
Entry 1. Many years ago, Gaster is tasked with destroying the barrier by Asgore using soul power. He has either just been made the royal scientist or finally tasked with destroying the barrier. Entry 2. Gaster needs soul power, but can only get soul power from weak monster souls, and doesn't have strong human souls. This means the entry must have been typed before 21X, when the first human fell into the underground, meaning that these experiments didn't start as a result of Azrael's death, or the human falling into the underground. Entry 3. Gaster states that extracting a soul from a living monster would require an incredible amount of power, and that he doesn't have a way of making a soul from a monster last. This implies that the core has yet to be created, or the core itself isn't powerful enough, though I believe it's the former reason, as Gaster was said to have created the core, and why would he go through the effort to make it if for not this very reason?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
4. While researching humans, Gaster snoops around the castle and finds weird tapes that he thinks Asgore has yet to watch, assumedly because of their distressing content. Gaster keeps them for himself. He is now going behind Asgore's back. If the tapes Gaster found are the same ones found in the True Lab TV room, then the first human has now already fallen down and died. A great time has passed since the last entries. And if Gaster didn't know about these tapes to begin with, then who hid them away? Entry 5. Gaster has either obtained or created blueprints and used them to create a process or a machine for extracting the will to keep living and the resolve to change fate from the human souls. He names this substance determination. The plurality of the word souls implies that more humans have fallen down since the first human, meaning another good amount of time has passed since the last entry. Entry 6.
Please talk about consistency.
Gaster starts to gather bodies of fallen monsters. They are comatose and will soon die. He is about to inject their bodies with determination in hopes of their soul persisting after death. This implies that determination isn't what is needed to destroy the barrier, but the soul power mentioned in Entry 2 is, and that the soul power is a distinct substance. The bodies have come from outside the city, implying that these experiments cannot be too close to home and need to remain secret, with participants scraped from the outskirts of society. Entry 7. Gaster says that he needs a vessel to wield the souls of monsters that will eventually turn to dust, meaning that soul power probably cannot just be applied to something like determination. It must be wielded as a soul or a collection of souls. Entry 8. Gaster has chosen a candidate for the vessel, the golden flower from the outside world that grew before all the others in the centre of Asgore's garden. It's the first one to have appeared just before the Queen left, and he wonders what a soulless being will do after gaining the will to live. Gaster has now presumably injected the golden flower with determination and is studying it, while Toriel has taken the body of the first human from its coffin to the ruins at some point between Entry 3 and 8. If Toriel left near immediately after her son died and Asgore declared war on the humans, then the last 5 entries may have taken place over the course of about 3 months.
Jeez.
Entry 9. We step way into the future. Alphys, Asgore's new royal scientist, is now assumedly at the same point of research Gaster was in the previous entry, injecting bodies with determination as well as a flower from Asgore's garden. Alphys, however, is a fraud. He lied about Mettaton's true nature to impress Asgore, claiming that he was a robot with a soul while leaving out that Mettaton was once a ghost, implying to Asgore that she's been able to extract a living soul from a monster and put it into a vessel. It's how she got the job, and now she's made promises that she can't keep. Entry 10. The flower Alphys is using seems to be a failure, as they're no different from the control cases. We can assume this flower...
Okay, I gotta pause here, but so again, that kind of just pulls into thinking, like, how long were the bodies just there? Or alternatively, so there are 2 things here. Either A, the bodies were just sitting around for so long, and the Alphys just ended up injecting more determination into them. Or these whole things of, getting monsters who had fallen down and injecting them with determination had been like this series of experiments that had been going on for an absolutely phenomenal amount of time. And it's only once Alphys came around and she injected even more into them, and the flowers presumably as well, that stuff started breaking down and it going wrong.
Wasn't the one Gaster had picked, but instead just a random gold flower picked from Asgore's garden. The fact that she's using a flower of all things implies she's somehow copying the previous experiments, as why would she care to use a flower as a vessel? She is somewhat of a fraud after all, so if the documentation of the former experiments are still lying around, why not just use them? This may also imply she knows of the former royal scientist Gaster. Entry 11. Alphys doesn't want to finish Mettaton's body as she doesn't want him to stop talking to her, assumedly because she has no other friends at this point. She just gets too sweaty working on the body anyway. Clearly she has yet to meet Undyne and Mettaton is now already a star.
Yeah.
Entry 12. Alphys has reached a point of desperation. Nothing is happening. She's made promises. She starts injecting everything and anything with more and more determination. Alphys doesn't know what she's doing. Alphys doesn't know what happens when monsters have too much determination. She doesn't know what happens when a flower has too much determination. Entry 13. Alphys states that one of the bodies has opened its eyes. Entry 14. Snap back to the past. Gaster and his determination experiments have caused the bodies that had fallen down to be woken up. They're walking around like nothing is wrong. They have been injected with determination, but assumedly not as much as Alphys' patients. Gaster thought they were goners. Entry 15. Gaster's determination experiments have wrapped up. He sent the souls back to Asgore and, assumedly in secret, returned his golden flower vessel to Asgore's garden. He called the families of the fallen monsters and sent them home. He will now pursue other areas of research.
Okay, again, so forget what I said before. So Alphys just possibly found the old like notes and stuff from Gaster's experiments, ended up copying them, and then due to poor like lab etiquette and just being not a scientist at all, ended up pushing them way too far and ended up giving the monsters too much determination, and it ended up causing them to turn into the amalgamations instead of just turning alive, because presumably it took a while for the bodies to wake up again after being injected with the determination, and Alphys was just being really impatient.
Entry 16. Whip forward to modern day. Alphys has injected too much determination into her subjects and now beholds the results. Entry 17. Whip back to the past. The Wingdings entry, dictated by Gaster as seen on tape, possibly the last experiment Gaster ever did. After the dead end that was the determination experiments, he's tried other experiments. This experiment is recorded and performed while two other characters are present. He's creating something very dark.
Two things about that. One, I remember hearing, I can't remember whether this was an actual theory or in a fan comic, but I remember somebody kind of did the thing where the two people that he was talking to were actually Sans and Papyrus, because the whole thing was like, the theory is that Gaster is a skeleton, and then Sans and Papyrus kind of just appeared one day, so they might have been like artificial creations of Gaster, all that sort of thing.
Never hear from him again after this. Entry 18. One final jerk forward towards the future. The vessel Alphys kept injecting with determination has disappeared. Entry 19. The families keep calling Alphys about their loved ones. She's ignoring them. Entry 20.
Yeah.
Asgore messages Alphys multiple times. He wants to know what's happening. She's ignoring him. Entry 21. The final entry. Alphys starts to spend all of her time at the dump out of self-hatred and a desire to isolate. While contemplating her future and a reason to persist, she meets Undyne.
Okay. Yeah, so here's what I'm thinking almost. I was almost going to say that earlier in the video, I was going to say that it almost seemed like the way this video was going, that it almost seemed like Flowey and the amalgams weren't created by Alphys. But like the way this stuff is laid out here, the fact that like Alphys, not being an actual scientist, ends up just copying former experiments just so she can show that she has something at the very least, and ends up doing it wrong and pushing it way too far. Again, this is all stuff that I don't think I've ever seen anybody else talk about, so I'm very happy that I've been watching this so far.
Right, that's scary, isn't it? Multiple determination experiments, multiple monsters that were injected with varying degrees of determination at different times.
Which some of them actually did come back to life successfully, which I don't think I've ever seen anybody, I don't think I've ever seen anybody actually talk about before.
Multiple flowers injected at different levels and at different times. Alphys walking in Gaster's footsteps and may know more about him than she's letting on. We'll get into all of the implications of that in a minute. But there's still that one burning question all the Ubermensch Chads want answered. Because it needs to be answered.
Yeah.
Why are the entries presented to us out of order with mixed up authors like this? Well, the answer is simple yet long.
Theory bait.
There is one other character to have inhabited the True Lab prior to all of this, aside from the main character. A character that knows more than anyone else does. A character
Flowey.
with a plan possibly centuries in the making. Flowey. You see, Flowey is a bit of a weird one. They simultaneously exist with all of Azrael's former memories, but none of his compassion. From their retelling of events to us during the genocide ending and the pacifist prologue, we are to understand that they only remember dying then immediately waking up as a flower in the garden. From there, they develop a kind of applied psychopathy and start to exhaust all routes of entertainment, moral or not, as they are now an immortal, feelingless being. But that doesn't mean they're devoid of purpose. They still want to get out of the underground and have tried to get the captured human souls from the king multiple times. The True Lab entries probably aren't meant to appear like this, and I think Flowey is the one guiding us through the lab, if not through most of Pacifist. I'm going to go step by step and show you how it's all Papyrus's fault. So, where do we start? Let's start with us running for our lives when we receive a phone call from our good friend who we trust, Papyrus, telling us that we should hang out with Undyne soon. Now, apart from being ironically timed, it's also insidious. You see, once we actually do start hanging out with Papyrus and Undyne, Papyrus quickly excuses himself for an obviously fake reason.
Yeah.
Then returns briefly to goad Undyne into being friends with us. He's acting very directly, as if he's enacting some sort of plan. While we could chalk that up to him just wanting us to be friends with his friends, it goes further when he pressures Undyne to ask us to deliver her love letter to alphys. This, in turn, gets alphys out of the lab to date us, where we find none other than Papyrus and Undyne, ready to distract her further, culminating in her having to do laps with Papyrus. However, alphys' training is abruptly stopped by Papyrus, and she's sent home. Let's see that phone call by Papyrus in which he explains this.
This is my good friend, who trusts me. This is Papyrus, your also mutual friend. Alphys and I finished our training early, very early. So I was sent her home. Very home. Now, I feel strongly and for no apparent reason, you should also go there. To her lab. House. I have only good feelings about this. Goodbye.
So that...
Oh my god, I completely forgot about this. Papyrus met Flowey. And so Flowey was manipulating us through Papyrus, or with Papyrus, but just... Ah!
That's obviously suspicious. He's far too direct and lacks subtlety. He's
Well,
clearly up to something. He's been up to something this entire time. But more than that, there's a very good chance that this isn't Papyrus who's calling us.
This is Papyrus, your also mutual friend.
I mean, it's Papyrus's phone, but it's not him talking. Let me show you something. If you call Papyrus in every room you possibly can, you'll receive some hints about him being friends with a certain flowery friend.
Yeah.
This is confirmed as much by some of Toby Fox's question and answer segments with the characters of Undertale that he did from time to time. Sans also says that a flower offers Papyrus's encouragement, advice, and predictions. Sans says that someone must be using an echo flower to trick Papyrus, but he's clearly hiding his actual suspicions of Flowey.
Yeah.
So, okay, him and Flowey are buddies, but that's Papyrus's voice on the end of the line, right?
Howdy. It isn't my good friend, who trusts me.
Howdy. Howdy.
Well, no. Remember the echo flowers? Flowey leaves us a taunting message in one of them, in which he impersonates Toriel's voice.
He
So
can do
clearly change his
voices.
voice if he needs to. So why not change to Papyrus if need be? And finally, look at this. All of the instances I've found of when a character in Undertale says the word howdy. That's right. Asgore, Azrael, Flowey, and Papyrus. In this phone call only. This howdy ain't right. This howdy seems like a force of habit rather than anything else. This howdy belongs to a dreamer. This howdy is by Flowey.
This howdy.
So Flowey has been manipulating, if not impersonating, Papyrus for a while now. They've been using him as a proxy in order to get us to ultimately befriend everyone in Undertale. In Pacifist, after seeing how nice we were to all the monsters and after we befriended Papyrus, they realised they had an in to manipulate us. They got Papyrus to make friends with Undyne despite great animosity. From there, they were able to get alphys to leave her lab to date us, which in turn allows someone to write a very scary note for alphys in handwriting that she screws up and puts in the bin. So while we were away, Flowey has managed to get into the lab in order to plant, if you pardon the pun, said note, which in turn causes alphys to freak out and go to the true lab, which in turn allows Flowey to enact the next part of their plan, in which they call us from Papyrus's phone, telling us to go to Alfie's lab. Once there, we go into the elevator after reading another note that's in handwriting, assumedly left by alphys. What happens when we go into the elevator?
It breaks, right.
EM tether stability lost.
Now I'll point out here, this wasn't a random power outage, as we can just flick the switch and turn it back on. It also was a very specific outage, only affecting the elevators. As the switch states, it seems like this controls the elevator's power. The rest of the lab is still fully functional.
Just very dark.
So now that I've shown that Flowey is manipulating everything in order to get us here, can I prove that it's Flowey that's manipulating the displays we see dotting the True Lab? Well, the proof can be found in the fact that once the elevator power is turned on, the final displays are activated in the hall outside that were previously turned off. They only turn on after alphys leaves the lab, as if to avoid her seeing them, and unlike all the other screens, they have a disturbingly familiar smile on them, instead of the green glowing text as usual. Both entries, 8 and 18 respectively, seem to describe Flowey's creation, as if Flowey is taunting us. Another interesting thing about these monitors, aside from the two outliers I just mentioned, 8 and 18, is that they are actually hard-coded to turn off after we turn the power back on. Hacking the game so we avoid the elevator that takes us to the surface, we see that these screens are deactivated, like they're not always meant to be on, but they have just been activated for us.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they do literally activate just for us. They blink into action as we approach each one, like someone is watching us via some sort of camera system and activating them once we got close. If we do enter the final elevator, however, we get a call on our phone from none other than long-dead Azrael. Not that we know who Azrael is yet at this point in the game. Well, I say Azrael. It's someone who sounds like Azrael at least.
Chris, are you there? It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Who knows of Azrael's existence and can change their voice on a whim? Flowey.
Flowey?
We are
yeah.
then rocketed up to New Home Castle in the elevator, and what stops us from going back the way we came, forcing us to go towards the throne room?
Vines.
Vines. The same looking vines Flowey uses during the pacifist ending where everyone we've befriended on our journey eventually meets us. A meeting organised by Papyrus, who was told to do so by a certain little flower. Flowey uses this moment to steal the 6 human souls, and then absorbs all of our friends' souls, completing his plan to become a god. Now, rewind a bit. Flowey was the one who screwed with the displays and led us through the True Lab. The question remains, why are they messing with the entry order? What purpose does it serve them? Well, I don't think it is serving a purpose. I don't think Flowey knew they were messing with the order of the entries. I think Flowey genuinely thought they were putting these entries in order in the same way we viewed the entries being in order at the start of this video. You see, Flowey wasn't created during Gaster's time. They were created when alphys, many years later, injected a flower with too much determination.
And brought it to life.
Alphys and Gaster did the same experiments, and you were to look at each of these entries as being written by the same author, then it stands to reason to think that these entries laid out like this are in fact chronologically in order if you assume they were by the same author, and so Flowey lays them out as if they were. It's not an airtight theory, but the fact that Flowey probably doesn't know about Gaster's existence, and therefore made a mistake when showing us all the lab entries, thinking they were all by alphys, is at the moment the best explanation I can come up with. But that's more supposition than I'd like.
Excuse me, sir. You say that these theories aren't airtight. I mean, if these aren't, I'm afraid to see what you call something that has holes in it. All of this is like stuff that I've never thought of, or even like I honestly, I am so happy that people were suggesting that I watch this. This is absolutely just phenomenal. I had never thought of any of this before. Or I've never even seen anybody else talk about this before.
So if we take the theory as a whole, that there were two determination experiments, one by alphys, one by Gaster, done years apart, with determination injected into monsters and flowers, can we find evidence of Gaster's experiments outside the lab in the world of Undertale? What happened to the monsters and the flower he injected?
The echo noise.
What would we expect to see in the distant future of the Underground if Gaster had performed determination experiments? Remembering that it was alphys that went all slap happy with her determination injecting due to her being somewhat of a fraud scientist, we can assume that Gaster, who pioneered determination research, was probably more responsible with his injecting. If his experiments didn't turn out to create a bunch of amalgams and his patients got better, then we'd expect to see some ungodly old monsters in Undertale that aren't boss monsters like Asgore and Toriel. After all, why wouldn't Gaster just send these monsters home if they were perfectly fine? According to entry 15, he did call the families and let them know, then planned to send them home the next day. Are the monsters from that time still around? Well, the immediate thought goes to Gerson, the ancient turtle who is assumedly not a boss monster that has lived since maybe the Monster-Human War if he's not lying about being a part of it, but he's definitely been around since the Queen was giving her speeches at the castle. That may mean he was one of the initial subjects of the experiments, right? Well, it may also be because he's a turtle. And as turtles are long-lived in real life, it might just be a perk that comes with being a particular type of monster. This has been the current theory for why Gerson is able to stay so old for so long, but the idea of multiple determination experiments now throws a new possibility for his longevity out there. So in order to prove this possibility of his longevity...
Well, then again, this is also like ignoring the fact that determination might have just added like... this is also, this is also ignoring the possibility that the little bit of determination that Gaster injected into these fallen down monsters, if the experiment actually did happen, again, this is all a theory, that it might have just prolonged their life a bit, like it like not to an absurd degree. It might have just been a little bit of gas. He might have just, I don't know, put a little bit more gas in the tank to help keep them going a little bit longer. Again, we have no idea. Again, it was alphys who put the ungodly amount of determination into them to cause into her experiments to cause them to melt. So we have no information on what the difference in the amounts that the two scientists injected were.
Can I find any other monsters that are incredibly old? Well, how about these two lovebirds/dogs? What makes them incredibly old, you ask? Well, there was this one little throwaway line that's always been bugging me.
I was wondering why he kept using them as examples of monsters that had fallen down.
Number 2, Nuzzle Champs 98. Number 2 Nuzzle Champs. I wonder who was number 1. Oh, that's right. In Asgore's room, there's a trophy that says number 1 Nose Nuzzle Champs 98. But that's strange. Toriel left when Gaster was still conducting experiments, so this trophy would have had to have been from before she left. Now, the first human fell at the end of 21X and died shortly after that, which in turn led to Toriel leaving, meaning that this trophy would have had to have been from at least 1998. Since most monsters don't even remember the Queen, including our current royal scientist, that makes these dogs here very old indeed if they're number 2 Nose Nuzzle Champs 98. But Nose Nuzzle Champs, the other one just says Nuzzle Champs, maybe that's a different competition.
Alright.
No. The end credits for these monsters state that after Pacifist, they are finally number 1 Nose Nuzzle Champs. I can only assume they are number 1 now because Toriel and Asgore are no longer entering the contests due to child kidnapping and murder related marital strife.
Yeah.
It's important to note
one
that
would think.
Doggeressa says here, of course we were second, as if to say that there was a couple that would have assuredly have won due to their lovey-dovey nature, or possibly corruption due to their royal status.
Yeah, of course,
Queen,
yeah.
And Asgore was the king. It's tragic when she left, since everyone knew she was really the brains behind the throne. But it was also just a teensy bit relieving, you know? Those two were really insufferable together. Nuzzling noses, being all cute and cuddly in public, embarrassing their children.
God, I
They were
forgot.
So sweet. It made me sick. Thank God those days are over.
But what if Asgore entered a nose nuzzling competition with a side piece he'd been hiding after Toriel left? I mean, it could happen. Let's let my live reaction to a certain note during genocide explain why that's probably not true.
Oh, okay.
There is some white fur stuck in the drain. I've read this already. Say what, mother? I can't remember saying that. Note says I've read this already. And then I've got written here, I'm gonna have to look back at my thing. And yeah, that was snails. There is some white fur stuck in the drain. It's a note. Howdy, help yourself to anything you want. Unused since Toriel left. House seems to be unused since Toriel left. So did Asgore just leave the fucking house and has never been back since? Drain still has white fur in it, which doesn't make sense because, yeah, fridge is full of unopened snails implying Toriel once lived here. I've read this already, meaning note was written before the first human died. I've had too many rum and coke.
Of course.
I just need to chill out though.
Asgore hasn't been back to the new home house since probably just after the Queen left. That means that this trophy, as well as everything else in the house, has been sitting here gathering dust and unattended since Toriel left. This ultimately means that the Nuzzle competition and Nose Nuzzle competition were the same competition held on the same date. This trophy is from at least 1998. Combining this fact with both of these dog statements here and their endgame credits, we now understand that they came in second place to Asgore and Toriel when competing in a nose nuzzling competition in 1998. Toriel then left Asgore and sealed herself away, only to come back when all of the monsters went free from the underground. Another competition was then held and these dogs then came in first, due to Asgore and Toriel now being broken up. This implies that Toriel was somehow involved with hosting or essential to the holding of the nose nuzzle competitions, which is why the baton of Nose Nuzzle Champ was only ever handed down after she came back, implying it was a royal affair. And Doggeressa's statement of course we were second, implies she also knew of the Queen before she came back, confirming her age. And the final kicker to all of this,
Jeez,
look
okay.
who's credited for the creation of the dog couple. Toby? Why the question mark? Like Toby only had a hand in making them what they are now. There's only 2 other credited monsters who have question marks in their creator titles. According to the digital version of the art book for Undertale, Giftrot, who was created by Magnolia Porter, later had their horns altered by Toby. Toby then added the monster to the tundra area. Since it was a minor alteration, Toby is credited in Giftrot's creation in-game, but has question marks added to the end of it due to the dubious amount of input Toby actually had in Giftrot's creation.
Okay,
The
yeah,
second
that makes
question
sense.
marked credits belong to the amalgams. The fact that the question marks are here, even though they are credited to being created by Toby in the art book, imply that they were created or altered with in-game. It separates the art book credits and the end-game credits in terms of Toby's intent. As in, Toby with the art book is giving direct credit to artists who created each design, but the endgame credits are in fact crediting the creators of the monsters themselves in a more meta way. This has the implication that everyone credited in the credits is also somehow canon in the Undertale universe, or that the Undertale universe exists within our own universe as a game. Which it does.
It does,
but the game
yeah.
realizes this, that we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
Ultimately,
yeah.
the fact that there is a question mark here in the dog's credits implies one thing only. Toby isn't the only one who has had a hand in these dogs' creation. Somebody else has meddled with them, and the only reference to them in the art book states that they were inspired by a comic strip. But so were many other characters in-game, and they haven't got question marks next to their credits. So
Yeah.
in context with everything else I've shown about these dogs, there's only one conclusion that I can come to, and that's some sort of in-game intervention by an unknown actor caused that question mark. These dogs are very old. These dogs, creatures not known for their longevity IRL, are somehow able to resist death. I wonder how they're able to do that. Gerson's longevity because he's a turtle is now looking more suspect. It looks like all of these monsters were part of some sort of determination experiment. But are there any other characters that support this theory? Well, this rabbit refers to something important as if they have first-hand knowledge of it. Listen.
Ruins. Did you hear? The ruins have been opened up. And get this, they were opened from the inside. Apparently the Queen had been staying inside there for God knows how long. Pretty unbelievable, huh?
Remember how
She
everyone
knows
reacts
about the
to
Queen.
Queen's presence during the ending?
There's two of them.
This shopkeeper refers to Toriel as the Queen. They aren't surprised there's a queen to begin with, like everyone else. There's also this suspiciously placed Deltarune in the background, the same one that we see in the cave wall of Gerson's shop. Assuming that that Deltarune is part of Gerson's archaeological and historical exploits, implying it's ancient, then this Deltarune in the shop may also be just as ancient. The correlation is suspicious. Another possible character that may be incredibly old, and not because they're a boss monster, is the Riverman.
I mean, yeah, that one's kind of obvious. The river Riverman, it's just they're weird.
This is because A, he knows of the man who speaks in hands, which, if he is referring to anything to do with Gaster, makes him old enough to know of him.
Yeah,
And B,
definitely.
knows a bunch of other enigmatic information and is mysterious in himself, which makes him sus.
Yep.
Gerson, the dog couple, rabbit shop owner, the Riverman, all potential subjects of Gaster's experiments. But what other effects of these supposed experiments can we see? What other subjects were there? Well, the other major thing that should
The
be noted
flowers?
is if Flowey was created when alphys injected a flower with too much determination, then what happened to the other flower that was injected years before that?
Well,
the
just
one
a
that
little
was
bit.
replanted in the castle garden. That one surely had all of Azriel's memories in it, not the random one alphys had just picked up. Remember those buttercups Azriel mentioned in tape 3? We never actually see a proper one in game. All the flowers you see here are called golden flowers.
Okay.
The flower Gaster used as a vessel in his determination experiments is described as the first golden flower that grew before all the others, the flower from the outside world. Gaster injected determination into the only flower from the outside world, the golden flower. So if many years later these are all golden flowers, what happened to the buttercups? I don't know what happens when a flower is injected with determination, but say, like the monster's bodies during alphys experiments, it started to malform, and the small flower may not be able to handle determination well.
Yeah,
what
you'd
would a
think.
flower with a little determination do? Once again, let's assume Gaster didn't go ham with the good stuff on this one. Let's say he injected it, saw no change initially, and gave up on it and returned it to Asgore's garden. What would happen then? Well, for one,
It started replicating.
being that the flower more than likely had Azrael's and maybe some of the first human's essence in it from being covered in Azrael's dust while his body harbored the human soul, it'd be possible that maybe it'd have an unexplained attraction to the areas Azrael once liked to play around. Like the castle where he and the first human played, as Flowey told us, maybe the throne room. Or it may go to other areas around his house and it might start seeding itself and, if it's got determination in it, amalgamating onto different flowers there. It may pick up traits of other flowers in the same way the amalgams are a collection of monster traits and personalities, all mixed together. The flower may amalgamate onto a very common weed like, say, a creeping buttercup. Creeping buttercup with their creeping vines, and that flower may eventually, given enough time, overtake and replace both species of golden flower and buttercup to become some new variant. We may never see another buttercup again and wonder, where'd they all go? It may, if it spreads far enough, gain a mind of its own and make its own plan in a kind of hive mind. It might start to represent another type of presence in this world, separate from the humans and monsters, the flowers. This would imply that the flower that alphys picked up wasn't a special golden flower from the outside world like Gaster's, but just one of the many Frankenstein flowers that dot the underground. And because the initial golden flower that Gaster injected was the one with Azrael's dust on it, then it stands to reason that every golden flower
is
we
a
see in
descendant
Undertale
of
would
it.
also have a bit of Azrael's essence. Meaning any golden flower we see may become another Flowey, given just a little more determination.
Oh geez, that's
Finally,
a horrifying
was
thought.
Gaster's entry 17. If we assume that after the dead end that was the determination research, Gaster then went on to other experiments shown in the entry 17 dialogue, then what was that experiment about? Well, like the other videos, let's make an educated guess that the background music and sounds we hear in entry 17 is indicative of the location that that video was being recorded at.
Is this going to be talking about Deltarune?
That music is called Muse_Smile. It has only ever shown up in two other places, both in Deltarune. One is the shelter below the town, slowed down by 85%.
Yeah.
Which, if the videos are anything to go by, means that the sound is coming from deep inside the dark, dank shelter. But also, too, it shows up through our phone's receiver in the
dark worlds.
Well, that's all way too far out of scope for this video.
Yeah,
but
very
that just
much.
means I have a jumping off point for the next video. I hope you all understood and enjoyed this one, because from here, I'm going to start getting very out there in terms of theories. So I hope you'll all humour me and get ready for the next installment in this series, which could be about anything.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I gotta be completely honest here. That made me rethink so many things about Undertale and like the creation of Flowey and stuff like that. It truly is fascinating. Just showing like how set in your ways you can become when you think about stuff, and just all you need is a fresh perspective. This was that fresh perspective. Possibility that there were some monsters in the underground that were truly ancient that weren't boss monsters. And that there were more determination experiments. It's just... Oh, I'm definitely going to be looking forward to any of the other, like, theories that he puts out. I'm definitely going to be doing reactions to them. I definitely want to see them. But I'm very happy that I, watched this. Thank you to everybody that suggested it. And yeah, I've been getting so many Deltarune suggestions. My backlog of stuff that I want to do reaction to has been getting so long and nuts. I definitely have to start doing like more recordings of this stuff to start eating through that. But yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, I guess, yeah, with all that out of the way, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.